I'm Amit. I'm the founder of Weekday. We basically help companies hire software engineers who are vouched by other software engineers. And basically, we're building like a network of engineers who recommend the best people they know. And we make it a very easy and a very low cognitive thing. Because if you'd have seen like expecting people to refer someone is very, very difficult. Because if you would have asked your friends that, hey, can you recommend a great software engineer for, let's say, my startup or my friend's startup, chances are that the person would not remember the name of that person offhand. Like it's very hard to come up with a name on the top of your mind. And you wouldn't want to like, you wouldn't want to spam all your friends in order to find out who might be looking out, who might not be looking out. And this is like one thing. And like later on, like it's say, like, if at all this serendipity happens that there's someone who you end up talking to, and you also remember that, yes, there was a friend who was looking out, then this sort of matching happens. We are basically trying to prioritize that serendipity and saying that, okay, can we make a very low cognitive effort in recommending the best software engineers, and the best opportunities is something that we'll basically try to help find via our product. So essentially the hypothesis that we're trying to prove is that can we build alternate data streams to surface or find the best software engineers or best passive job seekers, layer them with signals from like their friends or colleagues, and see if that makes hiring transactions much easier to happen, either just with the top of the funnel or in terms of like conversions as well.
Understood.
Yeah.
And this seems like a very interesting way to solve the problem. So just want to take a step back first, and want to ask you what insight led to this problem statement or this approach of solving this problem.
Okay, so that actually happened when my so in our previous startup. So prior to starting Weekday, I had a company called Memer, which was a consumer social startup where we basically trying to solve for content creation in new to internet users. And there we basically felt the problem firsthand, just realizing how difficult hiring software engineers was. And that was back in around 2018. So things were not like very different then as well. Like right now, it's very difficult to hire software engineers. That time also, it was very difficult. And I had always heard that, yes, like because so prior to starting that company, I was working with a VC firm called K Capital. And I had heard everyone sort of in portfolio companies talking about how difficult it is to hire engineers. And I had a sense of that it would be difficult, but how difficult is something that I didn't know. And when you actually realize that, okay, first is like just building a pipeline of people who would be interested in it, because we were an unknown startup, like nobody knew about us. So things become much more difficult for startups, which are like unheard of. And there, what we basically ended up trying to do is, hey, everyone told us that referrals are possibly the best way to hire engineers, because you can't expect like people to sort of come and apply to you. So inbound won't work. You can probably reach out to a bunch of folks, but they would have not heard of you. And you'll have to do that on a very, very regular basis. Referrals would be people that who would possibly trust you faster. So we tried that. We asked all of our friends that, hey, do you know anyone who you think would be a fit for us? Everyone said, yes, I'll definitely let you know when that happens. But nobody actually came back. Nobody actually came back saying that, hey, this is a great software engineer, you should hire them. And then we thought, okay, like it's like these people do want to help us. It's not that they don't want to help us out. It's basically a very high friction thing. So we thought, like, let's try to make it easy for them. Let's just ask them. So that was at that point of time, it was like we would meet our friends. So we asked them to just open your LinkedIn, scroll through all your connections. We'll basically put some filters that these are software engineers and these many experience level. So we basically put a certain filter and just go through the LinkedIn connection list and just tell us who are the ones that you would probably vouch for. And that we ended up building like a large, and we ended up doing this exercise with a bunch of people, like more than around 30-40 people. And we had like a long list of people who were vouched by other other software engineers, and we basically ended up reaching out to them. That ended up increasing our pipeline by sort of 10x.
Wow.
These people did it because they were our friends. We thought like this sort of high friction thing people would not do if they were like strangers. So we thought, okay, why don't we just prioritize this approach and increase the top of the funnel?
Understood.
Because at the end, like hiring software engineers is like a supply demand sort of problem. There's supply is not enough. Can we try to artificially increase that supply by surfacing passive engineers? So that's essentially what led to us starting this. And when we basically exited our sort of previous startup and we were thinking of what are the other interesting things that problem statement that we could pick up, one very glaring thing was that yes, hiring was one of the biggest problems we had faced, and an interesting way in which we had solved it. We wanted to see that, hey, could this work? And that's what we are trying to prove now.
Awesome. This is quite interesting, yeah.
Yeah, like the whole idea about passive engineers, I think like that, like people who are not essentially like seeking out for jobs, but you can like tap into it through this mechanism. I think like it's
really like increasing the supply itself and not focusing on the demand. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's like, because like in our sort of in like hiring software engineers, demand is actually not at all a problem.
Yeah.
The problem ends up being supply, and supply is like artificially constrained because the only supply you can tap into is like active engineers.
Yeah.
And that is fairly limited because like only when like a person has like dedicatedly thought that yes, I'm going to switch a job now. And those are the only people who will end up entering into the active funnel and then will probably join like a marketplace or something. But increasingly what is happening is, as like the industry is sort of moving more towards outbound, wherein like everyone, like now all the sort of bigger companies or like even startups which raise like a certain amount will hire a person in-house who do just the sourcing or talent acquisition piece. So they'll reach out to a bunch of people on LinkedIn, etc. And now whenever that is the way anyone becomes sort of activated, they'll not actually think, okay, let me also try to join a marketplace. And that's why you would probably not get that supply. And like everybody in their silo is now trying to reach out, send like bunch of mails and LinkedIn in mails to people and trying to find out, like trying to broaden the supply, while at the same time, because of that, the active supply is also shrinking.
Understood. It's a very unique insight into the problem. And I think that comes very strongly because you were also found and you yourself faced this problem. Understood.
As a flip side to this, Amit would like to curious to know, like, is there something like counterintuitive that you sort of learned while exploring this problem statement?
So in terms of counterintuitive in the sense that we would have probably so one thing is like first thing we expected is, hey, there is you recommend a bunch of people, you basically make, like if they end up getting hired, you make a certain amount of money, and that money is like a very huge amount. Like we basically started with like, okay, you make like 1 lakh rupees or like you can make like 2 lakh rupees, whatever amount, and you'll end up and if and you recommend people, if anyone gets hired, you make this 2 lakh rupees, and that should be a great motivator, is what we thought. But as we sort of went along, we basically saw that the number of recommendations people make is much more when there is not a promise of money, but there's actual money, even if the money is much, much lesser. For example, what we basically do right now is like we basically pay people on if anyone they recommend ends up getting interviewed. Even though that money is just 1,000 rupees, people appreciate that money, and the number of recommendations someone makes increases much more, as opposed to the chance of getting that 1 lakh or 2 lakh rupees, because there's a probability associated with it.
Yeah.
Now in hindsight, that seems sort of okay, like it sounds intuitive, but at that time point, it was not intuitive to us. And I think that's the same sort of logic, which is why a lot of people don't actually prefer something like ESOPs as well.
Yeah.
Because there's a probability associated with that money coming in.
This makes a lot of sense because we employed this for our users also. For we use this technical loss aversion, where the promise of a gain is not as good as the fear of a loss. So if you tell them that, I'm going to give you 1,000 rupees now, and I'll take it away if you don't do it, then people are more likely to do that thing versus you tell them I'll give you 1 lakh rupees if you do that, which is what we also
Correct. Yeah.
covered with our users, which is a brilliant insight. I think giving them smaller sums at milestones is much better than giving a large sum at the end. I think
Yeah, and basically you reduce the probabilities. So
Yeah.
whenever you reduce the probabilities, so it's not exactly loss aversion.
Mhm.
It's still, it's basically a gratification, like it's more instant gratification rather than delaying that gratification too much. You basically trying to make gratification a little bit more instant, and the more instant you can make, the more you can actually expect people to do this on a repeated basis.
Awesome.
Yeah, like just like having an assured angle to like, okay, this much I'm gonna win for sure, essentially out of this effort. I think
Yes,
that's the
exactly.
Awesome. That instant gratification. I think, but we can use this in our products also. I think. I think you mentioned about Mima, right? And as a second-time founder, just wanted to understand that what are the learnings or what are the challenges that you have carried forwarded from Mima to Weekday? Basically, what are the problems that persisted across Mima and Weekday, and what are things that you're doing better that you didn't do in Mima that you're doing right now in Weekday?
That's a very interesting sort of question. I think one of the major difference between like when I tried starting up earlier, when I'm doing now, is an understanding of what I want. Like why am I doing this startup? Like what exactly motivates me? For example, what I've realized after doing the first startup is, like I myself as a founder, it's not something which probably translates to a lot of other people, but I myself am a founder or a person who wants recurring validation. And I would not, so for example, like you can also get validation from, like, for example, when there's actual money coming in, like in the B2B startup, there's actually money coming in. That's a very recurring sort of strong form of validation, versus you doing a consumer social sort of startup, wherein there might be validations in terms of like user feedbacks, user reviews, or your metrics going up. But it's not the same thing as, let's say, like your money coming in here. Like they're not actually paying for your service. So I think that was a very fundamental sort of difference, that at this point in my sort of life, I probably am more suited to do more of a B2B startup, where it's like one step at a time. And you basically take one step at a time, you do one thing, and problems are more clearly defined, versus in a consumer social sort of domain, where it's like, yes, one miracle that you will probably end up growing at a super high speed. You will basically acquire a lot of users, you'll end up retaining them as well. And there's another set of miracle is that you will be able to monetize these users as well. So I think that part of thing, like that is something which always lingered in my head. Like I always thought, oh yes, monetization will happen. It's like a thing, but it's not. Even though I tried to make myself believe that yes, that will happen, but I didn't have any concrete proof for it. So there was a constant doubt in my head with my own startup, like what exactly am I doing? There was always a constant lingering doubt in my head, no matter how much you try to sort of prove that, okay, yes, monetization will happen.
Creative analogy, isn't this similar to the one that you just shared about getting a huge sum at the end versus getting smaller sums, instant gratification? Wouldn't you say that recurring validation is similar to getting instant gratification, where you're constantly being told that, okay, yeah, we are on the right path, versus in a consumer social startup that you get a huge sum at the end of the journey?
Correct. I think that's a very interesting observation. Yeah, I think those 2 points do correlate. Yes.
Understood. And any other basically challenges that you see, like as you said that hiring was a challenge, right? What are the other key challenges that even though you're a second-time founder, you still say that I don't know how to solve for this?
I think one of the major things is just like, so even though you're a second-time founder, or even if you become like tried like 5 different times, at the end you still always have to find that product market fit, whether your users want your product, and getting your users to actually use it is always discovery. You'll probably have like a few, like you'll be probably better at intuition, you'll be better at decision making, but that's always a different challenge you'll face. All the other sort of stuff like that, whether doubts in your head, you'll be more assured, you'll know what to focus on. Those are things it probably helps you when you're doing it on a repeated basis. But the whole, because the market is not going to be the same, the users are going to be different. What you're asking them to use is going to be different. So the whole dynamic is very unique all the time. So getting people to use your product and then use them on a repeated basis, which essentially means that they love it, is a challenge all the time. Like, and this has so much deeper intricacies as to why people keep on repeat using your product. Is that it's always a new journey. Like, no matter how many times you try, it's going to be a new thing always.
Fair point. Fair point.
Right. That's super interesting. So on an ending note about Weaver, right? Like, I think both of us are like super curious about, like knowing more about how did you navigate the exit part of it? Like, as we know, like it was acquired by ShareChat. So like, how was the process like? And as a like first time founder, like you would have been in that situation, like it would have been like a unique experience, right? So like, how did you go about navigating through it and what all went on?
Yeah, so it was, so for the acquisition piece, it was not something which like I basically wanted. I would not like, the acquisition was not something which I would call like a very successful one for me. So it basically, the dynamic was such that we were at the time when sort of the investor sentiment towards consumer social was very bleak, because that point of time, TikTok was still like the market leader. Almost all the consumers, any consumer app that you build, like Chinese copycats would emerge very, very easily, and it would probably like be by a dance copying the product. And even if like the general sentiment was that if the market leader gets copied very easily, what is the mode? And then they end up acquiring more users because they'll probably have more money. Then what is it that basically differentiates you? So while we had raised a seed round, we had like a few months of runway left. And that's when we basically went to Ankush at ShareChat for general advice as to what basically we should do. And then and I had basically done that with like a few other founders as well. And the recurring thing was that it might be a little bit difficult for you to raise. So then we basically started exploring sort of exit options. And then sort of that conversation happened. I was also having conversation with a few media companies, but this one sort of transpired a little bit faster. And then that's basically when we ended up getting acquired, or this was more like an acquisition / acqui-hiring sort of.
The first startup, right? And there's obviously emotions attached to it. And how was that journey like for you when you had to say that, okay, now I'm shutting this?
It was a difficult one because it's not like it's not that you alone are doing it. There are a bunch of others who have basically put everything. Like, for example, we had a bunch of people who had left their hometowns, came to Bangalore just for this particular job they're doing. And it was like a sort of very close-knit family. So it's what you're telling them is, for example, if you're basically shutting down, so that is why like something that we wanted was that at least like the product or some part of it's like still alive, or there's a team that basically keeps on doing a very similar work as well. So that's basically one aspect. It's not just you, it's a bunch of other people as well, and who believed in you. And that is why they basically came, because you made certain promises to them when they were sort of joining. So that is one. And the second thing is, when you sort of start, you have like a very high sense of optimism that, okay, this is like very wishful, hopeful thinking. And that's why you probably start that I'll probably change the world. I'll do this. And when you keep on doing it, like it's like, you need to keep that motivation up. So that's why you always keep on reassuring yourself that, okay, yes, it's going to happen. It's coming. And at certain point of time, you start believing that. That I will basically change. And when you're actually shutting down your product or like shutting down your company, it's so like something which had become a part of your identity. You have to let go of that. You have to not believe that, okay, this is something which I've been telling myself for those last 2 years, 3 years is no longer true. That I'm probably not going to do that. And then there are certain other things as well. Like, for example, you also doubt yourself. Okay, like, am I good enough? Like, I thought that I would probably be able to solve it. There are other people who are able to do it. Other people who are able to raise more money and then probably sustain it. So there are certain other doubts you have on yourself as well at the same time when you're like a core part of your identity sort of breaks. And at the same time, at least I sort of ended up trying to justify myself, saying that, okay, like, probably I could have done this for a bit longer. I would have sustained. Versus me trying something else. And what exactly, like, if you try to do like a sort of cost benefit sort of type analysis, like, okay, these are the risks here, these are the rewards here. I ended up sort of choosing that. And if I, in retrospect, like, for example, if I had probably sustained, the TikTok ban would have happened, and then we probably might be something else. That's basically another thing, which was a few doubts which I had. I didn't know that TikTok ban would happen, but I knew that if you sustain long enough in a business, there are things that will probably happen which will go in your favor as well. So I knew that at that point of time as well, but I think I made the call that, okay, I'll probably shut it down, because the benefits that I see right now is probably sustain this for 1 year, 2 year more. But then what? Like, I'm not really seeing, for example, my retention numbers. I probably have to change a lot of my product to sort of get to retention numbers as same as TikTok. So it was more around like, okay, if I do this 1 month or 2 year, 1 year down the line, will I again do the same thing? Will I again be in the same state 1 year later? Then it's probably better to sort of shut down now. And now that I think of it, if I have to like take that decision again, I've probably taken that decision again. And that is the framework that I had put in myself. Okay, like, what if everything went right? And you were, let's say, 1-2 years down the line, would you have again made the same decision? And that's the framework that I put, that, okay, then if that is true, then let's shut down now. And that is the point that I made, that I had to realize that realization about myself as well. Like, I probably need a little bit more validation than few other sort of founders, which is an okay thing to have. It's not a bad thing.
This is very important. I think this is going to be one of the highlights where you said about the framework that even after 2 years, I'm going to be doing the same thing. Might as well end it now, right?
Yeah.
This was important.
Yeah, I think it's interesting in terms of like general, like especially the approach about like what is the maximum opportunity cost that this call can have, right? Like when you basically visualize the like best possible outcome for me, so like that would be like the like maximum sort of potential opportunity cost, which like you need to be okay with in order to move forward.
But the thing with that is that no matter whatever you do, like if your heart is like, okay, this is something I have to do, you'll end up justifying by doing all those analysis any which ways. So you will end up justifying, but it actually helps you sort of make peace with your decision.
Understood. Right. Fair point. Fair point. Wow, this was interesting because what I have seen is every founder that I have interacted with has always been about that optimistic journey, right? I have started in this like wishful thinking, as you said, right? But having a framework and having an objective view to how to close your own like startup, that was an interesting insight that doesn't come along very often, to be honest.
Yeah, but I think a lot of it is actually driven by external factors as well. A lot of times external, because it's internal as well, because like at the end, probably if you're shutting down your business, if it's not like an acquisition which is coming very inbound and there's like a lot of money to be made, then that's a different sort of frame of mind. The other is like probably your users are not loving your product. There are certain reasons as to why is that. You can try to solve it, but do you think that that'll probably change in the few months or not? And that's at the end, like after you've done something, at the end, it's like an external decision like that has been made for you.
Oh, can you talk a bit more about the external aspect of it? Like from what I understood that, at least founders are in control of startups as much as they can. Like, what do you mean by external factors as in investors?
Like one is investors is like you're not you don't have money to sort of sustain that. So when you don't have money, it's never very binary in the sense that you have money, you don't have money. It's always like I don't have the optimum amount of money.
Oh wow, yeah, this is important. I think it's not a binary.
You might end up having like some bit of amount of money. Then the choice is not that. Choice is that do I scale down my team and increase the runway and then give myself more chance to arrive at that point or be at the right time, sort of thing. And because you're increasing your chances of being at the right time by increasing the runway. So the choice is basically that. And there, sort of the external thing which I'm talking about is actually your sort of numbers. Like, for example, your numbers is basically a health of your business, right? For example, if my retention rate is, let's say, so retention rate like day 30. So we ended up measuring, like in a consumer social startup, probably retention rate is your definition of product market fit. So we had that like at, like, let's say we are at 15%. If you want to reach to like a 30%, it's not going to be by doing a lot of A/B testing, not going to be increasing like one more feature, and you're sort of, you probably have to change a lot of core of your product. And that's an external decision, right? For example, now you've built a product, you've shipped it out, you've like thought that, okay, by my intuition, by my sort of understanding, this is the best product which is out there, which I can build. Probably I can make a few more tweaks to it. I can probably increase that 15% to, let's say, 16%, 17%, probably 20%. But getting to 30% feels like a very external target. It's not really under your control.
Understood.
So it basically is a lot of external numbers that are coming to you. You can change a few things. But getting to from 15 to 30 is not something that you can change. You can probably change your acquisition numbers. You can't change your repeat behavior. You can't change your retention numbers that easily. So that ends up becoming an external. It's a very external sort of metric.
Yeah, like then the call is more about like the current core loop is what it can drive for you. And then like there's only like so much you can sort of fundamentally change about it.
Yeah, and you can probably, the other option then is, okay, do I let go of that fundamental like core loop and build another loop, which basically is like another doing anyways to is another startup. Because in consumer social, you can't like anyway, like if you change like a certain bit of the product and the whole reason why users use your product changes, then the whole product is basically different.
Understood. Yeah, you're essentially creating a new product itself. Understood.
Yeah. So the external is like consumer, like customers don't want your product. That's an external thing. Investors don't want to buy your shares. That's another sort of external thing. Another external, like that was not in our case. For example, like co-founders leaving is another external thing. But like it was not in our case, but it happens quite a time.
Understood. Fair point. And I remember you talked about, certain emotional difficulties hitting founders in general, right? That self-doubt creeps in, and you also get anxious, right? And then how do you sort of clear your head and get up in the morning like, I have to work on this and I can't let this cloud my judgment? How do you do that as a founder?
I don't. Like I actually don't have an answer to that right now. I probably don't. You basically learn to live with it. And you can try to be delusional about it.
Okay.
But there's like different people have sort of different personalities. A few people, it's easy to be like delusional. Basically means that, okay, if there's doubt coming in, it probably comes from a real reason that there's something which is not happening, which is why this is happening.
Yeah.
And either you can choose to live with it, that, okay, this is something that I have to chip away every day, sort of small, I'll probably make improvements, or you can be delusional, okay, this is not the case at all. So I am like, and you realize that both the cases are pretty fine, because if you are sort of, I mean delusional in an absolute term, but it's not really delusional. Like another term for delusional would be like an optimist.
Or just having a blind conviction that my ideas will work.
Blind conviction, it will work.
Yeah.
So that's basically delusion. And it's a very good thing to have, but I've realized that I'm not that kind of a person that will probably have, will be very, very optimistic about something if there's not sort of validations coming my way. That is something that is like, I've realized that is not probably me, but a lot of people do end up getting, doing that and then probably succeeding a lot as well. So for those doubts, I think I've realized that probably you just live with it and then chip away slowly. And as things sort of move, they go away. And that's the state I've reached till now. I've not really gotten better at it.
Yeah, I think that point of early validation actually is an early indication that you're on the right path, and you need a voice to tell you that, no, if I keep walking on this path, I'll reach the destination, right? I think
So I think that the journey that you choose also determines that. For example, I realize about myself that, okay, I probably can't live with those many self-doubts about myself or about the journey that I'm doing. Am I doing the right thing? Am I doing the right thing every day?
Yeah.
So then you choose a different path. You choose a path wherein you get those validations, and that is in your hand.
Sure, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
I think a lot of the things that like we sort of touched upon here in terms of your journey and like how you choose to sort of navigate around certain things. A lot of the times that things boil down to like what kind of a person you are. Like essentially, like
I think it matters a lot more than what people end up giving it credit. Like a lot of times people don't think about that, what kind of person you are and what kind of company you would like to build. But I think you should give it a more thought than what people generally give. It's more about market, it's more about other things, but I think it's a lot more about you as well.
Right. And I think like of course, like people in general at this level are like fairly smart, right? And you can of course like deploy models and sort of rationalize the way you choose to go about things, but like centrally a lot of the times it's about like your conviction and what do you feel like more strongly about, and then like you find ways to sort of make sense out of it in a more sort of tangible way. Make it consumable. Yeah. So on that, like I see like this sort of word thrown around a lot, right? Like, do you have that entrepreneurial like DNA or like founder DNA in general, right? Like through which like people in general say that, yeah, like I can't be an employee, I have to ultimately like do something on my own. So like for you personally, like how do you identify that trait, or like for personally, like if you were to sort of point down to something that this is that moment or like this is that trait which like you found out in yourself, which made you feel like, yeah, you have to be an entrepreneur.
I think you started Weekday 2-3 months after Mima, right?
Yeah. So I think for me, it was so like I basically realized very early in sort of in college itself that working, like I did an internship, etc. And I realized that work. So there are multiple reasons why you do a startup. I don't think there is such a thing as like a entrepreneur's DNA as such. I think anybody can basically start a company. I don't think it's basically driven by the kind of mindset, etc. There are different kind of all very different kind of companies you can build. You can be founders of very different types, no matter what your sort of mindset is. But I think for me, the motivation was that I probably, like, one of the bigger motivations, I really didn't want to work for a larger company. That was my sort of the number one thing. I think like, for a lot of people, it is that they would probably want to change like a problem. Like the problem is something which they can't just live without. Like, okay, I have to change. I have to change it. And a lot of these people are generally like more mission driven thing. I don't think I am at this point in my stage of life right now. It was, my motivation was more driven by that I probably can't work at a larger company. Other thing I realized that I like to build things. I actually derive a lot of joy when whatever I build, people use it. So these are the elements that I realized in my sort of when I was in college, and then I thought, okay, I'll have to do I want to do a startup. That is something I said, okay, let's give it a shot. I gave it a shot for the initial my first startup, those 2 years. And I realized that this is a kind of lifestyle I love doing. And it's like, it's me, like I can do that for a very long period of time. I basically realized that if that is the best thing that came out of sort of that startup, was that realization that I can probably do this for a longer period of time. And the fact that one day everything is breaking, one day everything is, all the stars aligning in your way, and it's could possibly be like within a couple of hours as well, like things change very drastically. And this sort of experience is something that I actually enjoyed. And the level of uncertainty there is in a startup. So the way you sort of navigate those uncertainties, nothing is given to you on a silver plate. Nothing is easy for you. Those are certain characteristics which I think I liked about being in a startup. The fact that you don't have money, you have to probably do a lot of jugards, etc., is a negative thing. But I think the pros sort of outweighed the cons. So that's why I've come to the realization that I want to do startups. Hopefully this would probably be my last one. I'll like to do this for a very long period of time. But I think this is something that I've realized. I think I realized this in college as well. Like, there was never a moment in time which came to me that, okay, I want to do it. It was more of a constant thing that, okay, I wanted to do startup. In my basically first job, I interacted with a lot of founders. And so one thing which gave me sort of more general assurance that this is something I want to do is because whenever I talk to them, I felt a little bit jealous that, okay, that you're basically, you get to do that.
Yeah.
And I am just like talking to you, and I get to live that thing for just for an hour, or like whenever you're having the conversation. So I think that was a good sort of insight for me, that because of that I realized, oh, I'm getting jealous by that. That basically means that I actually want that.
That's a very good indicator, actually. Yeah. On the final note, just want to talk to you about your vision for Weekday, as in 5 years from now, 10 years from now, what do you envision Weekday to be? And from a shorter point of view, or shorter time period also, like, what is your vision for Weekday?
I think for Weekday, we basically want to build out sort of a network intelligence, like a network model where there's signals on top that, okay, this, which basically make, so can we build a model wherein a lot of information which is in people's heads, which are like right now not monetized, can we make it monetizable? Right now, that is for our hiring transaction, could also be for an investing transaction, could be for any of the any general transaction. But are there network intelligence which we can utilize to enable these transactions is something that I would probably see as a vision for us going like 10 years, 12, 15 years down.
Targeting anything passive, anyone passive, and converting them into basically converting them. So right now you're doing for hiring, where you're converting passive job seekers to actually converting them, and then changing that to, let's say, a passive investor to actually invest in your company, something like that, right?
So like more around terms of like, there are certain set of enablers who have this information which is not really available. For example, in like take an example of hiring, or if you take like in general, like for example, investing as well, there is like a founder that is very good. You can vouch for them very strongly. But if, let's say, like a third party person is evaluating them, they probably who don't have that information.
Understood.
And can we make use of that information, which is only in your head, to facilitate any of the transactions? And that information, like a lot of people, if it was true and believable, and we'll obviously have to put frameworks around making it believable.
Yeah.
But if it was believable, if there was information was readily available to me, would it make those transactions much easier?
Understood.
Like
so
in some sense,
you
can
think of
crowdsourcing information, like crowdsourcing trustworthy information, essentially. About
crowdsourcing referencing itself, right? Background checks, crowdsourcing background checks.
Yeah, background checks is one of the other sort of transaction that you can think of. Like this is a post-hiring transaction.
Yeah. Understood. It's very interesting. It was a very insightful call, to be honest. I learned about a lot of new things. Any ending notes?
Yeah, and I think it's generally great. Like whenever you're trying to vocalize something, it actually reassures your thinking as well. And like, okay, this is actually how I thought about it. So it's actually very enriching for me as well.
Oh wow, that's good to hear.